Alright, so this video is for Christians who keep Sunday as the day of rest, as the day of worship, the holy day, because the Sabbath day is not actually on Sunday, it's on Saturday. So I'm going to prove that with historical and biblical evidence and show some of the consequences for not keeping the Sabbath day and keeping your own tradition Sunday instead, and where that even comes from. Okay, so I'm going to start with this historical evidence here that the Sabbath is in fact Saturday. So we look at 70 AD, okay, the destruction of the Jerusalem area and the temple, and we see that this occurred on a Saturday, which is because the Jews were resting on this day. This is when they were vulnerable, and this is when the Romans knew would be the best time to attack. So it says, Cassius wrote that the Romans who learned that the Jews rested on the days of Saturn, Saturday, which was known as Saturn's Day in Rome, attacked the Jerusalem stronghold on those days. And of course, Saturn's Day evolved into Saturday. Okay, similar to the words of the historian Cassius Dio, another Roman soldier equated the day of rest, Sabbath, of the Jews to the day of Saturn, Saturday, which was known as Saturn's Day in Rome. Okay, so you have two witnesses there from history that Saturday, that is the Sabbath, right? So we also see biblical evidence here. The Greek word Sabbaton, Strong's Greek Concordance, G4521, okay, Sabbato, I think that's how it's pronounced, used in the original Greek manuscripts of the New Testament, which is translated as Sabbath in English, is the same word that is used for Saturday in the Greek language even today. In other words, the day which is known to us as Saturday is called Sabbato by the Greeks even today. Okay, so Saturday and Sabbath, they mean the same thing in the Greek language. This is what the New Testament authors, who were inspired by the Spirit of God, chose to write because they were equating Saturday with the Sabbath. Okay, what most people do not understand is that the amount of days dropped from the Julian calendar when it was changed to the Gregorian calendar did not in any way affect the 7-day week. Okay, in other words, even though 10 days were removed from the calendar, it did not affect the individual days of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, etc. Okay, you can see an example of this in the 1500s. One location changed from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar, and the days went from Thursday the 4th to Friday the 15th. Okay, so the monthly calendar that was interrupted, but the 7-day week kept its cycle. So we did not lose track of which day is the actual 7th day, Saturday. We still know for a fact that Saturday is the same Sabbath that was kept 2,000 years ago, and we have never lost track of this 7-day week, even though the monthly or the yearly calendars may have been interrupted or messed with. All right. So then you might ask, why is everybody in the churches today, why are they, so many of them at least, keeping Sunday as the day of rest and worship instead of Saturday? Well, this comes from the Roman tradition from Emperor Constantine. Okay, it says, on March 7, 321, Roman Emperor Constantine issued a civil decree making Sunday a day of rest from labor, stating, all judges and city people and the craftsmen shall rest upon the venerable day of the sun. Okay, so Constantine, he was a sun worshiper. He was supposedly the first Christian convert, okay, of the Roman emperors, but he was still worshiping the sun at the same time. So he was mixing the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils, and you cannot do this as a believer in the Messiah, Yeshua. Okay, so this is sin, and he enacted his decree, his man-made custom, upon Rome, which of course had massive influence upon Christianity at the time because it was encompassing many of the places where Christians lived. Okay, so this decree caused people who did not rest to be punished by the Roman government. Okay, so that's why so many Christians gave in and started following this Roman tradition instead of keeping the commandments of God. All right, and we see later in this same century, the 4th century, we get this Synod of Laodicea. Okay, and in Canon 29 it states this: Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day, rather honoring the Lord's day, which they consider Sunday, and if they can, resting then as Christians. But if any shall be found to be Judaizers, let them be anathema from Christ. Okay, so they're literally saying you are anathema from Christ. You are kicked out of the church if you want to observe the Sabbath instead of our man-made Lord's Day, which they consider Sunday. Okay, so the issue with this is that Sunday is not the Lord's Day. Okay, Sabbath, that is the Lord's Day, Saturday. Okay, we see this if you just read the scriptures. Matthew 12, verse 8, for the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day. Exodus chapter 20, verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore Jehovah blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Isaiah 58, verses 13 to 14. If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, okay, this is the Lord's day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honorable, and shalt honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words, then shalt thou delight thyself in Jehovah, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of Jehovah hath spoken it. All right, so this is the Lord's Day. It is on Saturday, not Sunday. Okay, and some people might object and say, oh, well, aren't you keeping Saturn's day? Aren't you, also doing something pagan? Because it absolutely is pagan if you're keeping Sun God Day, Constantine's venerable day of the sun. But the difference with us keeping Saturday is that we are not keeping 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. days like the Romans. Because biblical days, God's days, began at sunrise. So the true Sabbath day is Saturday sunrise to Sunday sunrise. It is 24 hours. This is how it was from the days of creation. God does his work, then comes evening, then comes morning. The first day ends at morning of the next day. So biblical days are not 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. like the Romans, but morning to morning, sunrise to sunrise. So no, we're not worshiping Saturn. We just say Saturday to make it make sense in our modern language with our modern calendar. Okay? All right, now let's look at the consequence, how the Messiah sees us laying aside the Sabbath day and keeping Sun God Day instead. So it says in Mark chapter 7, verse 6, he answered and said unto them, well hath Isaiah prophesied of you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. For laying aside the commandment of God, ye hold the tradition of men, as the washing of pots and cups, and many other such like things ye do. And he said unto them, full well, ye reject the commandment of God, that ye may keep your own tradition. So your heart is far from God, and your worship of him is vain if you want to keep Sun God Day and lay aside the biblical Sabbath day. Okay? Here's some more consequences of breaking the Sabbath. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 16, there dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish in all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, what evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. There it is. God brings great wrath upon his people if you profane his Sabbath day. But then, contrary, you see blessings for people who keep it, as we read in Isaiah 58. Then Isaiah 66, verses 23 to 24. This is prophecy about the future kingdom of heaven. This is what it says. It says, and it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me. For their worms shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring unto all flesh. So everybody in the kingdom is keeping the Sabbath day, all flesh, not just the tribe of Judah, the Jews. And if you don't keep it, you are going to be a carcass being looked down upon, because those are the transgressors of God's commandments. So start keeping the Sabbath on Saturday. Stop going to Sun God Day church and honoring man-made traditions over God's commandments.